Possiamo? Okay. So, good morning, everyone. I'm very glad and very honored to start this workshop. I introduce myself. I am Marco Piras. I have a double role today because I am the coordinator of the master and the deputy of the department. And I speak with a double roles. But just a couple of words just to introduce this event. Inside of the master in climate change adaptation and mitigation, we consider an important step to talk about the e-mobility. Then it was mandatory to organize something about these topics. And when we have to talk about this important argument, it's important to talk with experts. Then today we have very important and very very important also people and expert about the e-mobility. Then we try to discuss and to see what is the actual reality, but also what is the future about the e-mobility. Why e-mobility and climate change? Because absolutely mobility is one of the key points in the climate change, in particular the e-mobility. Nowadays we see what is the situation around the world, the aspect respect the carbon and the other fuels, so that it's very important to see an alternative strategy and what happens in the future. So I don't want to stall other time for the audience and also for the speakers. Just to say that this is a very important opportunity for the student, for the market, but also for the other audience. Thanks also for the remote audience. I invite the students to take the maximum opportunity for this workshop. Then please, as I said, always be curious, and I hope that at the end we have an open discussion where it's possible maybe to discuss with some topics. Before to leave the floor, it's necessary to say a special thanks. First of all, a special thanks for the invited speakers that are very, very expert about these topics. Then I say thank you very much for the engineer Maritati, engineer Catacchio, and engineer Ravello that are the key speaker in this workshop, and they give us surely a very innovative point of view about the topics e-mobility. They work in a very important company, but later Professor Bruno Dalla Chiara gives a short introduction. Another special thanks to my colleagues, Professor Bruno Dalla Chiara and Professor Coviello, who helped me to organize these meetings, this workshop, and they will moderate the workshop after the keynotes. And also a special thanks to Elisa Vanin and Sofia, that is not maybe here, so that helped me also for the organization and for the logistic point of view. And also, thank you very much for the students and for the remote audience that participate. So, I don't stall other times that I leave the floor to Bruno Dalla Chiara, Professor Bruno Dalla Chiara, who is a full professor in transportation, that is, I think, an expert, and I consider an expert on mobility and e-mobility. Please, Bruno, if you can give us an introduction of our very important expert and thank you very much, and so good job.
Thank you, and thank you. Welcome everybody. Welcome to our speaker, in particular Mattia Maritati, who comes from the IVECO group. He started with his Bachelor and Master of Science in Automotive Engineering at the Politecnico di Torino. Then he spent some time in Fiat and Sterlantis in 2012, more or less. Then in IVECO and in Ford in 2014 until 2016. Afterwards, so has been in IVECO Group for 6 years as nowadays gas business development manager. And we will introduce the perspectives concerning the evolution of heavy-duty vehicles, because this morning, as you have seen, the first part on heavy-duty vehicles and afterwards on light vehicles and light-duty vehicles. And the issue is, given the decarbonization, given the dependence the transport system have on oil-derived fuels, given the need to respect the environment, both at local level and at global level, what can be the solutions for heavy-duty vehicles, considering a number of aspects that Engineer Maritati will outline, I suppose, concerning how far batteries can solve that, how far alternatives as natural gas or other fuels or energy carriers can satisfy these needs. Okay, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Okay, good morning to everybody. First of all, let me thank you for the invitation. It's a very big pleasure to stay with you today, and the chance is to talk about which is the strategy of IVECO for the decarbonization of road freight transport. So, as anticipated by Professor Dalla, I'm Mattia Maritati, and working in IVECO, I'm responsible for gas and biomethane business development. But let me just introduce my company, IVECO. IVECO is a full-range manufacturer specialized in the engineering, manufacturing, and commercialization of commercial vehicle, operating in the segment as a full liner from light commercial vehicle, passing through the medium, and also arriving into the heavy range, declining into both on-road and off-road applications. IVECO is part of IVECO Group, a newly born company. Since January 1st this year, the IVECO Group has been born due to the spin-off from our previous mother company, which was CNH Industrial, with a clear intention to be really focused on the business, on the highway, and to be really concentrated on our core activities. IVECO, in its long history, this is lasting almost 50 years, has been always devoted to innovation. It is really part of IVECO DNA. And IVECO is also one of the OEMs that's really understood the importance of having sustainable transport solution. And this is the reason why we really think that this is a key important, because the air quality and climate change do not wait. It would require an action now, so we cannot wait, of course, to new technologies, okay, to scale up, but it really requires an action that need to be undertaken already now. And with this sense of urgency that IVECO is embracing this challenge. But before entering into the detail, let me give you a little bit of context about the heavy-duty road segment. Because what we will see here during the course of this presentation is focused on heavy-duty transport, because it's a very peculiar segment with very peculiar needs, which are somehow also different compared to the need and the challenges that we will see in the light commercial vehicle and passenger cars as well. Because of course it's a different world with different needs and different specifications that needs to be accomplished. But which are really the road transport challenge that our industry needs to face? As you can see from the graph, of course, it will be a conjugation between the emission, both decline in terms of pollutant and CO2, but also to somehow provide an effective solution that allow to have a sustainable and competitive TCO for our customer. Because we always bear in mind that our customers are fleet companies. They stay in the market, they operate in the market, they are providing their logistics services, but they would like to make money out of their job. So we need to provide, of course, sustainable solution that will allow to optimize the TCO, which is the total cost of ownership, which is basically the cost that our customers see for operating the truck, which is, of course, need to be a profitable one, because our customer need to operate into the environment in a very competitive way. But what is concerned pollutants emission, we have clearly seen that the attention of the policymaker has been shifted from the pollutants reduction toward the CO2 emission reduction. From the graph on the right, of course, you can see the evolution that we got from the reduction of particulate matter and nitrogen oxide, which are the two main pollutants for a diesel engine, which has basically, starting from the first emission regulation, the Euro 1, until to the latest, the Euro 6, has been drastically reduced. And with the new regulation, the Euro 7, which is upcoming in the next, in the upcoming years, basically those limits will be further decreased, really achieving the limit of the technologies of an internal combustion engine. So it is clear that from a pollutant emission perspective, we go into a CO2 emission perspective. And on the blue line of the graph over here, basically you see that over time, the CO2 emission related to the transport industry has increased over time. This is not due to the fact that the technological innovation was not so effective. On the other hand, it is totally the opposite, because over the years we have always been constantly focused by the introduction of fuel-saving features, new components such as low rolling resistance tire, predictive functionalities, connectivity services, really helping the customer to reduce their fuel consumption and consequently the CO2 emission. The reason for this increase is basically due to the fact that the demand of transport has been increased over time and consequently also the CO2 emission. So it is very clear that we need to take an action. And the reason regulation was rolled out by the European Commission in 2019, which was setting the baseline as average of the CO2 emission of the total industry, making really a 0.0, and setting some targets of CO2 reduction. In fact, our industry needs to be compliant of a reduction by 50% by 2025 and 30% by 2030. As I was mentioning before, in order to achieve this target, of course, we need a breakthrough solution, because the limits of the current internal combustion engine are already quite stretched. So we need to have a new technology to be introduced, and the name of this technology is, of course, electrification. But we also always to bear in mind that we need to take into account the TCO for the customer. That needs, of course, to be a positive. How IVECO is challenging or is approaching to the electromobility. In 2019, IVECO has announced a joint venture with American startup company, Nikola Corporation. And it is a very fair partnership where both partners are really contributing together, bringing the two core business and the core competencies within the joint venture. Of course, IVECO is providing all the know-how related for engineering and manufacturing of the vehicles, while Nikola is providing competencies related to the electrification. And as you can see, lots has been done since this partnership was announced in September 2019 during the Capital Market Day in the New York Stock Exchange. And if you consider that this was the years characterized by the COVID pandemic, you see that many things has happened. And today we are really proud to say that we have already the first vehicle running in the US, making the first customer field test. Because within this partnership, the main goal is to develop the electric mobility for both the United States and the European level. So what you can see here on the graph is basically the Nikola 3, will be our product, that will be of course, designed in partnership with Nikola. It will be manufactured in Europe, in Germany, in the Ulm facility, which was a previous existing plant of IVECO. And within the Nikola 3, we see clearly two approaches. The electrification from the introduction of a battery electric vehicle, so the BEV version, from one side, and from the other side, the electrification decline as a fuel cell electric vehicle. As you can see here on the slide, we start seeing already some specification of the truck will have. We are talking about 645 horsepower. For what is concerning the range, the Nikola 3 will get 560 in the battery electric vehicle and 800 kilometers for what is concerning the fuel cell electric vehicle. And for what is concerning the battery version 1, it will be equipped with 9 packages of battery capable to store 753 kilowatt hour. Just some picture of the truck also from exterior and interior point of view. You see how the innovative and dynamic will be also the new vehicle, very inclined, very introducing also new digital services and connectivity services as well. As I was mentioning before, the trucks for the European production will be assembled in Ulm, in Germany, in our pre-existing facility plant. But let me also share a little bit where we are with this project. For what is concerned the BEV, basically the prototyping phase has been successfully completed by last year, and today the first customer field testing units are already up and running, while for the European version, the customer field tests will start by this year. In fact, we have the commitment to hand over by the end of the year the first batch of 25 units to the Hamburg Port Authority for the first trial and implementation of our truck in a battery electric vehicle. For what is concerning the fuel cell, instead, we need to wait still a little bit more. The start of production is expected to be materialized next year, and at the moment, for what is concerning the fuel cell, we have accomplished and completed the first phase of the prototyping phase. Now, after having said what we are working on currently, but for what is concerning the heavy duty, we need to understand which are the challenges for the electrification in heavy duty sector. As I said at the beginning, heavy duty sector is, let's say, very different compared to the other segments of the mobility for light commercial vehicle or passenger cars. Because as you can imagine, the big issue is not just to deliver the truck ready to be used. Of course, the challenge is to build the ecosystem, which is really all the boundary conditions that are around the vehicle itself. And another important challenge is, you can imagine, is to the scalability. Because our customers are not owning just one truck. Let's say big fleet companies can have a number of trucks that can go from a minimum of 100 up to even 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 vehicles. So as you can imagine, really the transition and the conversion from a diesel conventional technology toward electric, as you can imagine, is not an easy one for sure. And among all the environmental or the boundary condition around the product, of course, we can talk about infrastructure, new service development, as we will see, and also very strong key enabling factor to enable really the transition. But let's also try to deep dive a little bit, which are the challenges, of course, that we need to face. First, mission coverage. Can we do exactly the same job as we do today with a diesel engine? Let's see. If we talk about payload, and considering that in Europe the vehicles are running with a gross combinational weight of 44 tons, basically, which is the payload that we can carry with with an electric truck versus the diesel? We need to admit that we will have some deviation versus the conventional diesel mission. In fact, the battery electric vehicle would be able to carry 3 tons less compared to diesel, while the fuel cell just 1 ton, so a little bit better. Which is the reason why? It's simply because an electric truck, it is equipped with a battery pack, and just this battery pack weighs around 5 tons. Just to give you an idea, an Arctic 4x2 configuration, which is basically the common vehicle that you see in our motorway, on which you can attach semi-trailer, it weighs 7.5 tons. So if we make the comparison, 5 tons over 7.5 tons are just the batteries. So as you can see really the challenge. And then we talk about range. Here we already talked about which are the the best autonomy that we can reach at the current stages of the technologies, of course. Just to bear in mind, a diesel truck for long-haul configuration can make even more than 3,000 kilometers. So you really see the gap that we have here. And then, also the most important one, recharging time. The battery electric vehicle would be allowed to be recharged in 120 minutes, 2 hours, but at 350 kilowatts of power. Just as to give a reference, in our home, there is an installed power of 3.5 kilowatts, so meaning 10 times more. So we need the same power of 10 apartments, so you can see the high demand of the power. Of course, there will be the possibility to have overnight charging with a narrow or smaller power capacity of around 100 kilowatts, and in that case, the recharging it will take from 8 to 10 hours. So quite useful and effective if you're using, for example, the truck only during the day. So you can recharge over time. For what is concerned fuel cells, the recharging time is of course equivalent to the diesel. The issues is that the hydrogen, the infrastructure for hydrogen and hydrogen itself, we don't have yet. But we are of course on the way in order to develop it. And also very important things we need to bear in mind that if we deploy the total heavy-duty segment, which is around, let's say, 300,000 units per year, you see the biggest portion of the heavy-duty is represented by the long-haul mission, so basically the long distance, which is basically contributing roughly 60% of our volumes, but it's also the main contributors in terms of CO2 emission, so accounting for roughly the 70% of the total emission of the industry. So somehow we see that, of course, electrification is a key pillar of the strategy, but at the current stage, let's say, will be not so effective in covering all the emissions that we are able to cover with a diesel truck today. Another important topic, of course, is the TCO for the customer. We said from the beginning. Of course, it's a new technology, also in a very early stage, and you may think that the amount of energy that we need to recharge a truck, of course, is much higher compared to the one that we need to use for a light commercial vehicle or for a passenger car. And here you can see on the graph an analysis that was done by the French Ministry of Transport, that has set up a specific task force, really understanding which would be the TCO of the different alternative propulsion. And the French Ministry did it because, of course, it is a strategic point of view, because, of course, if you see that the new technology would have a higher TCO, for sure, governments need to put in place some subsidies to support the transition. And from our point of view, from manufacturer point of view, you clearly see that a customer would happily accept a TCO, which is definitely bigger. No, we are not saying that it's slightly different. It would be quite of a different order of magnitude compared to the diesel one. So the challenge also from our point of view is, of course, to develop services to enable different transition. Also from a financial point of view, introducing new business model, like for example the pay-per-use, so the customer can pay for the real utilization of the truck rather than pay the usual price to purchase the truck from the beginning. Another important aspect is related to the energy mix. We know that, of course, electric vehicles are zero-emission truck, if we just consider, of course, the tailpipe emission. But we are also fully aware that the scale-up of the renewable energy at the European level, of course, we are still some progress that needs to be implemented, of course. And so we have seen which are the challenges that we need to face to support the scale-up of zero-emission vehicle. But we also said at the beginning that the air quality and climate changing are not waiting us to develop and to scale up the technologies. So the question is, what we can do now in order to start the decarbonization pathway? Of course, we can do something. But in order to approach to this topic, of course, we need to enlarge a little bit the way how we measure the CO2 performance of a vehicle. In fact, if you just consider what is going out at the tailpipe of a truck, basically we are using a time-to-wheel metric that for sure a battery electric vehicle or a hydrogen vehicle could have zero CO2 emission because they are not emitting anything for sure. And a vehicle with an internal combustion engine, even fuel with renewable fuel, for sure it will have a CO2 emission greater than zero. But if we broaden the perspective and we are considering also the portion of the value chain related for the production and the distribution of the fuel and the or the energy, adding a little pieces more, so basically the well-to-tank part, we see that, as we said before, if the electricity is not coming 100% from renewable sources, for sure we need to have some CO2 emission for that part of the value chain. Why? If we consider renewable fuel, we'll see that the value chain is very effective in terms of CO2 balance. So, combining these two aspects together, using a well to wheel, so until really to the wheel, so at the end of at the downstream of the tailpipe, by combining these two things together, basically, for what we have for battery and hydrogen, if the energy is not 100% coming from renewable sources, the overall emission on a well-to-wheel perspective would be higher than zero. While if we use renewable energy, we can approach to carbon neutrality. We can be basically net zero carbon emission. And let's see how this can be possible. But first, let's see what are those renewable fuels. As I said by the word, of course, renewable fuels are fuels generated by renewable sources. So they are renewable by definition. They can be also sustainable because they can be produced from waste and residues. And they are very depending, of course, on the type of fuel, because, of course, in the type of feedstock we can use to produce this kind of fuel, they can have a very good potential in reducing greenhouse gas emission. And this is the reason why they are also called low-carbon fuel. We, as IVECO, we really believe that among the sustainable renewable fuels, biomethane can have a really and a measured role. But before saying and having a deep dive of biomethane, I would like to share a little bit of context of the gas mobility that and where we are right now. We can say that IVECO has been the pioneer of the development of the gas mobility. We are working on it since the last 25 years. At the beginning, it was developed especially for urban buses application. Then we moved to this application to trucks. At the beginning, related only to municipality or urban application due to the constraints in terms of autonomy, of course. But the real turnaround we had in 2016 when we launched into the market an Arctic configuration, which is the one that you can see over here, so is the configuration suitable for long application, with a double LNG tank configuration, so basically capable to store the gas, the natural gas, in the liquid form. And consequently, of course, having the possibility to extend the autonomy. And this is clear that with gas, we were able to address basically the biggest portion of the heavy-duty market. But which are the reasons for this success? And I mean, the sales figures are telling for us. Is of course that currently the gas is the only viable alternative that we have for heavy-duty transport to the diesel. So if you would like to start, of course, the decarbonization journey, you can do it already right now. Because the truck is able to provide performance, 460 horsepower, the autonomy, as I was stating before, of 1,600, which is, let's say, compared to the electric vehicle, of course, it's definitely bigger. Good enough, of course, to carry long-haul transportation, but also very important enabler are these two other aspects. Environmental sustainability, because a gas truck can emit less pollutants emission versus a diesel, especially if we talk, of course, about particulate matter and nitrogen oxide. But even if we use fossil natural gas, the CO2 emission that we are able to achieve is lower compared to diesel, up to minus 10%. If we use biomethane, of course, there is no story. Of course, we can reach almost carbon neutral, and in average, we are saying that we can reach a reduction of 95%. Another important driver is the total cost of ownership, because a gas truck is able to provide efficiencies from this point of view. To say the truth, this was, to be honest, this was true until this energetic crisis had impressively occurred in our life. As you know today, the gas prices has increased very much, with a factor of yesterday we touched 200 euro per megawatt hour, when in the past was used to 20 euro per megawatt hour, so you see really how the pressure is. And this was true because when the gas was at convenient level, of course the customer TCO had an extremely advantage. But also here we need to consider that the transition toward the biomethane today, to produce biomethane, is much less expensive of the current prices of the fossil one. So we have a perspective here, so to enable a transition toward renewable fuels. And it's also just to say, which has been the path that we had over the time, when in 2016 we launched the first track. And in orange, basically, we have the industry volume. So we see we had a growth of almost a factor of 10, from 1,000 up to almost 10,000 units as industry. And considering also that 2020 was the year of the COVID pandemic, we see that the industry for the gas mobility has increased year over year. Nevertheless, in 2020, we had registered an overall reduction of the total industry volume for heavy-duty trucks. And another important thing is market share. So the market is recognizing to IVECO the leadership in this segment, with a market share higher than 50% for all years. Another important enabler for this transition, of course, was the development of the infrastructure. Of course, the LNG network that was not existing before. And as you can see here, the trend is really following the same path of the sales. The same growth factor from around 50 stations of LNG that we had in 2015, and today we have more than 500. The most important thing here is that this network has been impressively developed over the last 5 to 6 years, is already capable for distributing the biomethane. Because, no matter if it is a fossil one or a bio one, basically the network can also provide the biomethane for our truck. And another very important thing to highlight, that today, the gas used for mobility application, that 25% of this gas is already biomethane, meaning that we have already started our decarbonization journey. But which will be the future perspective? So we have seen the overall penetration of gas mobility over the total volume was 3% in 2020, 4% in 2021, but we see a good opportunity to further growth, up to reach 10% by 2030. And which is the key enabler of this growth? Of course, it will be biomethane. But what is exactly biomethane? Biomethane is a molecule 100% identical to the one of fossil origin. It can be produced by anaerobic digestion of a certain feedstock that you can see here, which can be animal manure, crops, organic fraction of municipality waste. And so basically, you collect this material called feedstock, you put it into an aerobic digester, and basically you obtain biogas that will be upgraded into biomethane. And this biomethane can be used for heat and power application, and of course it can be used to refuel our truck. But why biomethane is so important? Because it's an enabler of circular economy projects, because it can really transform waste into opportunity. Just let's think about all the residues that we have from an agricultural point of view, or of the organic fraction of municipality waste. You can reuse it to produce, of course, biomethane, and another product of the anaerobic digestion is the digestate that you can use as a fertilizer. So it can go back to the soil and really closing the loop of the circular economy. Another important thing is that biomethane can contribute to the energetic independencies of our country, because it's 100% a local value chain. All the biomethane that we have today are 100% made in Europe, and as you can imagine, how actual is this topic today? 25% that you already talked about. But the most important thing of biomethane is the decarbonization potential, and according, of course, in a well-to-wheel method. Just to visualize which could be the contribution for biomethane, substituting one diesel truck with one truck fueled with biomethane, we can obtain the same CO2 benefit by substituting 72 diesel passenger cars with respective 72 cars charged with renewable electricity. So you can see which really the disruption that the biomethane can provide. And if we make a comparison, of course, we can see which are the advantages, of course, that we can use from biomethane. We have said at the beginning to have carbon neutrality, but depending on the feedstock type, we can go even further. In fact, if you use animal manure, basically, rather than having the manure just released on the ground in the atmosphere, which are, of course, big contributor of methane and CO2 emission, if we take it back, you are preventing this emission in the atmosphere, and the overall balance can be even better. We can go even further. We can reach the carbon neutrality. And this was confirmed also by a recent study by the CNR, in which there was a comparison of 11 different scenarios, in which have been considered a feedstock mix to be used for the biomethane production. We will just focus on the last one because, of course, it's the one which has the biggest potential. And we compared to the fossil LNG and to the diesel B7. You see basically that if the feedstock is 100% animal manure, basically you can have a CO2 reduction potential up to 120%, meaning that the CO2 that you are absorbing during the production process is higher compared to the CO2 that is emitting at the tailpipe. So basically, we can really open the area of the carbon negative transportation. So basically, we are reducing the CO2 emission just while making run our trucks. Of course, there are also many success stories that are telling us that the moment or the time for biomethane is really now. We already mentioned the output of the French Energy Transition Task Force led by the French Ministry, in which it's saying that, of course, electrification is the main route, for sure, we cannot go back, but in the meantime, the biomethane is a very viable alternative because, of course, it's supporting the TCO for customers. There was also a recent endorsement by the French Ministry on Transport for this. Also, Italy is a good example. According to the biomethane decree, which has put very important funds, around 4.7 billion of euro for supporting the biomethane value chain, basically, at the moment, there are so many projects that will see the light in the next upcoming month. So, basically, for what is concerning the Italian production, here we are talking about bio-LNG, which for us, of course, is one of of course, the best fuel because it will enable utilization in our trucks. We'll be able to have a production that somehow will be able to cover the entire running fleet that we have in Italy today. So we can really see that this transition, it is possible. And another point is that many customers are really understanding this point. We have many examples all around Europe, from Italy, France, UK, Germany as well, but we always love to mention our latest sales that was happened last year to Amazon, in which basically we have sold to this company more than 1,000 trucks to be fueled with bio CNG. Of course, there are remaining challenges and obstacles on the way for the biomethane uptake, for sure. Which are the main ones? We still, of course, need to protect the gas ecosystem because the natural gas, if we talk about fossil gas, we see this as a really bridging technology toward the net zero carbon emission. And at the moment, we know that we are under attack due to the high prices that we have of the gas. But we really need to make this ecosystem survive in order really to enable the transition to the biomethane, because biomethane today there is not enough availability of biomethane in Europe. The overall European production, we are around 3.5 billion cubic meter, which is definitely not enough. But there are many studies that are telling that the biomethane is scalable. In fact, according to different studies, they are assessing a potential from 35 to 125 BCM. So everyone is agreeing that the biomethane is scalable, there is the potential. Maybe there is still a certain uncertainty on how this potential could be materialized over time. Third point is, of course, the minimum share for transport, because biomethane will be not demanded by just transport. There will be other industry demanding biomethane. But the good thing here is that according to our forecast for the running park evolution, by 2030, it would be able to achieve, if we keep this pace, around 150,000 units of heavy-duty trucks by 2030. And considering this running park to fuel the entire fleet, basically we would need only 5 BCM, which is definitely much smaller amount compared to the potential we could there in 2030. Last point, but not the less important, is of course, due to this decarbonization potential, also it would be good if the role of the biomethane and the potential of biomethane could be also officially recognized in the CO2 target achievement by putting in place maybe some flexibility measure, like a crediting system or a carbon collection factor. And in order to conclude, basically, how we see the future of the heavy-duty mobility. As you can see, we will see a mix. We don't have just one technology, we will see a mix of technology. You see the gas conventional one are destined to decrease. We will see the uptake of the electric mobility, and by 2030 we can reach for the electromobility and overall penetration they can go from 20 to 30%, while the blue part, which is the gas mobility, will stay stable and will increase a little bit also, thanks to the decarbonization opportunity granted by biomethane. So within IVECO, so we have very clear and precise roadmap. We are really supporting the technology neutral approach, because there will be not just one technology capable to fit all the need and all the mission, but in the future we will need a set of technologies that will help us in order to reach, of course, our target and our decarbonization target. And this also will allow to respect the commitment that we already got, that was communicated some months ago by our CEO, Pierre Marx, to be net zero carbon by 2030. So with 10 years in advance with respect to the targets that was set by the European Commission with the Green Deal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maritati. From my point of view, an excellent presentation. Do you have any question? We have some time left. Yes, please.
First thing first, I'm super delighted to see the amount of innovation that you implemented in your supply chain. We're going from diesel to electric engines. But I want to ask about your target market, such as Africa or South America. How much, to what extent you are intending to sell your trucks? And we know that end user products will charge accountable of the amount of CO2 from supply chain to transport. So how can you say that your trucks are not net carbon emission, but you are buying, for example, frames which are from steel, or wheels which are, for example, oil refining products. So to which extent you can see that your trucks are net carbon emission trucks? Thank you.
Okay, so to respond to your first question, of course, other extra-European markets are very important markets as well. Of course, there are also some constraints that we need to bear in mind. Different for Africa, for example, different climate condition, different temperature. We have already some good cases in which we have already some gas truck working in Middle East and in some countries of Africa. In Israel, we have a fleet of some CNG truck also. South Africa is also quite interesting market for us. And also we need also to to think also about which are the characteristics of the vehicles used in that countries, for example. So currently in our lineup we have the Arctic 4x2 configuration, which is basically the mainstream at the European level. In other extra-European countries are mainly requesting 6x4 configuration because they're having a higher payload. They need to be carried. So somehow there we are somehow investigating really the potential, no? Because if we see the good business opportunity, of course we will think of to develop something specific. But unless we have a good, let's say, sufficient volume to support us the development and investments that we need to do in order to develop those activities, of course, we need to find a way, because every project, of course, needs to be profitable from a company point of view, and we will need to have a return on investments. Especially,
sorry, how much trust you are intending to sell to these two continents, for example?
I mean, today, unfortunately, as I was saying, we have some constraints. So if we bring an Arctic 4x2, it will be not effective because it's not responding to the transport need. So today, we are just limiting on a niche application, basically. South America is also a very interesting market because it's also very steering toward biomethane. We see good potential there, but also there they are requesting a higher amount of cross-combinational weight that at the moment with the current product we are not able to fulfill. So, as said, we look this as a very important opportunity, and of course, if we can contribute to develop the business, we are more than happy. We are also taking some action in order to go into this direction, but there are also some really technical and physical constraints that at the moment we have to cope with. The second question, not sure if I got it correctly, maybe if you can...
The steels and the wheels, which are coming from government industry for CO2 emissions, like, for example, wheels, which are oil refining products. So
you mean the components to build the trucks?
Yes, those components are really emitting a huge amount of CO2. How can you deal with this effect and the waste of management of waste after the end life of these trucks?
Of course. In the slide, you were saying that there are different metrics on how to measure the CO2. We have the tank-to-wheel, the well-to-wheel. If we even extend in a broader way, we have the life cycle assessment. So considering also the production process and also the recycling phase. Of course, we need also to keep and to state on what the regulation are telling us. So the norm, the regulation is somehow regulating the CO2 performance of a truck is the CO2 fleet regulation, which is just considering only the little portion, so the tank wheel. On the other side, of course, there are in place some strategies from a company point of view to reach the net zero carbon, as we said in the last slide, was just not referring to the vehicle itself, but all to the entire process of the companies. And of course, there are in place some measures which are to be undertaken at the industrial level to optimizing, of course, the process, to compensate also in case we have some extra CO2 emission, really to turn into a sustainable way. But we need also to consider which are the legal constraints that we need to accomplish that today are on for trucks are only looking at the tank-to-wheel. The rest is basically the company commitment that is getting to be also a sustainable value chain. Please.
There was the question here.
Yeah, so that's linked to this question. So your commitment as IVECO to be net zero by 2030, is that considering the scope 1 emissions, the scope 1, 2, and 3, so all together, or just your part? Your just I don't know how to explain better, but I think you understood me.
I mean,
so the chain, the whole chain with upstream and downstream, or just your piece?
No, it's basically the portion of what is basically the role of the company. So starting from what we're taking as an input, of course, all the operation that we do within the company, within the industrial operation, and also, of course, what is concerned, the final output with the recycling phase until the end of the program. But we need to consider, of course, which will be really the contribution of the company and the leverage that we can do in order to act, of course, on this. Of course, to the supplier, of course, we have, of course, we would like to embrace this as a really new culture. Also, we're working with supplier in order to be to share the same principle and the same view that we have.
Thank you. There were two questions there. Yes, please.
Your opinion about it is worthy to electrify this vehicle, considering the environmental impact for lithium-ion batteries, and also the fact that it's very probable that renewable alone are not going to be able to support all the energy that's needed. So it is worthy, or it is better to focus on biomethane?
As I said in the last statement, I mean, we need to focus on every source of technology. I mean, there will be not anymore one single technology fitting for all needs. So electrification is a journey, definitely, which has been undertaken. We need to further proceed. We cannot go backwards. Of course, the zero-emission vehicle has a benefit. I mean, if you're running in the town or if you're making for heavy-duty truck, the so-called last mile, the vehicle needs to enter into the city center. Definitely there we have the benefits of having really a zero emission trucks because not emitting any kind of pollutants. So we know that also the renewable sources for electricity production will scale up for sure. I mean, today there are lots of room of improvements that we can do. So we cannot go back. Definitely electrification is one, at least for our company perspective, one pillar of our strategy. But we should not forget what we can achieve with other technologies, and biomethane definitely would be another pillar. Because just shifting everything to electrification, we clearly see that we cannot convert the entire fleet, and so we need really a multi-technology approach, but also a technology-neutral approach. Every technology counts.
Anyway, your question will be faced in a deep way in our module on sustainable transport systems. So we can enter into more detail. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have a question about biofuels. You're saying that manure could be used for or is used to create biofuels, but manure is already used as a natural fertilizer in agriculture. So could there be competition between fuel or field kind of thing?
I mean, good question. I mean, I don't see competition because, I mean, you can get the same benefits to be used manure as a fertilizer. You take the manure, you put it in aerobic digestion, you take biomethane, and you take the digestate. The digestate can be used as a fertilizer either, but you have achieved a very important target to subtract the emission, the CO2 emission, or the methane emission of the animal manure to not be released into the atmosphere because you are collecting it, you are subtracting, you are using, of course, this to produce biomethane, and the digestate can go back and to be used as a fertilizer, really not closing the loop of the circular economy. So, as I said, I do not really see a competition for the manure for other usages.
And further, so in Europe now, we're producing lots of biofuels. What's the source? What's the principal source for this biofuel?
Of course, there are many sources, and according to the sources, we can have, of course, different results. We need to be focused on sustainable feedstock, for sure. We would like to be focused on waste and residues, because we can use also some energy crops. We can use maize, we can use oil palm if you are talking about HVO, for example, which is the second generation biodiesel. The point is, of course, we don't want to use feedstock that can be used for other purposes, but we would like to use feedstock that are just wastes, because this is really not a key factor of enabling of a circular economy. And I mean, if we talk about waste, there are, I think, in the world so many wastes now that we can use to be transformed into biogas first and biomethane later. So the point is, of course, need to be focused on sustainability of the value chain. Otherwise, of course, the game is not working. But I mean, there are so many wastes around the world, and it can be really used and converted into biomethane.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I would say that we may stop because just a question from my side. That 3% in 2020 was referred to the fleet, to the share
Registration.
Registration.
So where registration. So the total registration of gas were the 3% in 2020 and 4% in 2020.
Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you very much, Mattia. It was a very clear, very forward vision about the future. Looks like that in the middle term, biomethane has a very interesting application, competitive both from economic and environmental point of view. My worries in that is not exactly circular economy. It's a spiral economy. What I mean that in order to have more fuel, you need more waste. And then in order to have more waste for having more fuel, and then you still go ahead in producing more waste. So it's not a circular economy, it's a spiral economy. So that's the main challenge. We don't want to produce more waste as a society. We should go through lessen the waste and be more as efficient as possible. Otherwise, it's going to be an enormous manure field around us in order to produce the energy, to have the truck moving and producing and transporting things to have the manure. So it's a complex economy. Just saying that, which worries me as a conceptual point of view.
No, but if I may reply, I totally agree with your concern. This is clear, but we have also seen that the potential. We're not pretending to convert the entire fleet. We know that we have a good potential. It can be exploited, and for sure, that's the reason why we're really supporting the multi-technological approach that we need to use, because really every technology counts.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again. Thank you very much again. Now is the turn of Stellantis group. Thank you. Also Vittorio Ravello, thank you. We have two. Stay there. At the beginning. Okay. So I just introduced them. Both of them come from the Politecnico of Torino, with different experience, of course. Dr. Engineer Vittorio Ravello is an electrical engineer. He took the Master of Science in 1991. And then he has been in Centro Ricerche Fiat, so research center of Fiat Group, now Stellantis, until nowadays. He is a Global Innovation Electrification Program Manager. While Gabriele Catacchio, who took again the Master of Science, as I said, from Politecnico Torino, but in Automotive Engineering, then a Master of Applied Science at the University of Windsor. And then he stayed some time in General Motors, in Chrysler Group, and afterwards in Centro Ricerche Fiat, and nowadays, since more or less 2000, well, has been for 9 years almost in FCA, and is Global E-Mobility Communication Manager. Okay, so thank you very much for being here. We will have two voices on this subject regarding, of course, light duty vehicles, and please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure being here, considering that I was a student at the Politecnico, not properly here, but at the Lingotto building, studying automotive engineering. So it's a real pleasure to, be here explaining what is the Stellantis strategy regarding electromobility. So first of all, let's start from a statement that the future of mobility is now. Based also on what the colleague from IVECO said before, we see that the evolution in mobility is something that is already taking place, it's not the future, it's something that is really taking place now. And for us, you will see in the next slide that e-mobility, so electromobility, is very important, is one of the main pillars of our strategy for the next coming years. So let's start from what is Stellantis, because maybe the brand Stellantis is not well known. Stellantis is a quite new company that was born 1 year ago from the merge of two legacy automakers, so the Fiat FCA, Fiat Chrysler Automobile, and the ex-PSA groups. So now we are a house of 14 brands, automotive brands, that you think that you know very well, so ranging from Fiat to Jeep, from Peugeot to Citroën, Alfa Romeo, Maserati, with a global footprint. But we are also active in the field of mobility services, in particular with two brands that are Leasys and Free2Move. The noble purpose of Stellantis that was announced some months ago is that, powered by our diversity, since we are more than 300,000 employees with more than 100 nationalities, we are trying to lead the way the world moves, offering sustainable mobility services. So the idea is to become a sustainable mobility tech company. And these are the main pillars we are working on. So first of all, electrification. The second one is autonomous driving. And the third one is hydrogen fuel cell technology that we think is an important trend to be taken into account for the future. Now, I would like to show you a video that explains in less than 2 minutes what is Stellantis.
We don't just make cars, we craft stories. Stories that have been part of our lives, that have made history, guided by a clear vision. Freedom of movement for everyone. Today, mobility is undergoing a fundamental transformation. It touches us all and enables our dreams. Connecting cities, connecting people, connecting present and future. It's about exploring new opportunities, responding to new needs, and all in harmony with the world around us. In this new era of mobility, it's not about being the biggest. It's about pursuing greatness. That is why we, a diverse and talented group of 300,000 men and women, working in 50 countries around the world, and powering iconic vehicles and mobility brands with millions of ideas, unbounded creativity, enormous passion, and a competitive spirit, are committed to pursuing new horizons and shaping a better world for the generations to come. We are combining our strengths, talent, and experience to provide our customers and society with the most distinctive, appealing, versatile, and sustainable range of mobility solutions. Because today is where we anticipate the needs of our customers, and where tomorrow's solutions are conceived. And we know that together we can create a better future. Our new journey has started. Stellantis, pursuing greatness.
Chiamate Stellantis. Come Stellantis? Je suis Stellantis. Siamo Stellantis.
Stellantis.
Vieni Stellantis. Especially Stellantis. We are Stellantis. We are Stellantis.
Okay, so after the video that I think that was quite good to explain who we are, I want to start from a number that is very important. So now we are living this enormous switch to electromobility, and we need to start thinking that based on some surveys, 64% of people worldwide consider an important action the preservation of the environment. And I think that the fact that there is a master in climate change is also a signal of this eco-consciousness trend that is happening wherever in the world. The difficulty for us is that we need to meet two important targets for our customers. So the first one is to basically respond in a good way to their request in terms of range. So customer wants to have vehicles that can answer to the need of range that they have. So we saw that starting from the small segment car to the luxury car. And our target is to create vehicles that can respond 90% of the needs of our customer in the compact and mid-size car segment in terms of range, and 100% in the so-called light commercial vehicle segment. And in parallel, there is another important pillar that is the affordability. So we know that electrical vehicle cost more than IC, so internal combustion engine vehicles. So the target for us is that from 2026, we want to release products with a total cost of ownership. We have the same word that is very important from the presentation of IVECO, that will be equal to internal combustion engine vehicle, considering the whole cycle life of the car. So I want to show you some of the targets that we have at Sterlantis. So we are starting from 2021, and this is the so-called LED mix. So when we talk about LED, so low emission vehicle, we refer to all the vehicles that can be plugged to the grid. So battery electrical vehicle, 100% electric, and plug-in hybrid electrical vehicle. So vehicle that has a battery that can allow the vehicle to drive in electric mode for at least, I would say, around 50 kilometers. So this is the mix at the end of 2021, 12.8% in Europe and 3.4% in the US. The target for us is to arrive in 2030 with 100% of BEV sales, so battery electrical vehicle sales in Europe, and at least 50% in the US. So our offer will be to have at least 60 BEV nameplates in Europe in 2030 and 25 BEV nameplates in the US. This is something amazing considering the number of vehicles that we have right now in our portfolio. And we have announced the 1st of March, so 3 days ago, our target in terms of carbon neutrality, that is carbon net zero by 2038. So as you see, tough target that we need to face, and it will be a long journey towards electrification, but as I was saying before, it's something that is happening right now. So I want to give you also an highlight of our investment that we are planning to focus on in the next 5 years. So we are going to invest 30 billion euro on electrification and software. Why electrification and software? Of course, electrification because it's the main trend that is happening right now to respond to the CO2 challenge. I want to underline the fact that the transport sector in the last 30 years is the only sector that has saw not an improvement, but worsening of the CO2 emission in the last 30 years. So that's why we need to invest in electrification to answer the challenge that, for example, the European Union is giving to us. You know very well the plan Fit for 55. So we need to reduce for 55% the CO2 emission in 2030 versus the 1990 levels. And that's why we think that the electrification is the answer. And of course software, because software is the brain behind electrification that allows to serve our customer with the best possible services in terms of electromobility. And I want to show you these slides that show the 14 brands of Stellantis. And the challenge for us is to use electrification as a way to enhance the DNA of each brand. So you know very well that each brand has different DNA, and I mean it's pretty interesting to see that brands that, for example, Abarth and Dodge, that are producing cars that are muscle cars or race cars, I would say, are claiming that now they want to eat the people but not the planet, so tear up the streets, not the planet. So the idea is that every brand is committed, Stellantis, to preserve the planet for the next generation. To do that, we have already now 34 LED models in the Stellantis portfolio. So it means 19 battery electrical vehicles and 15 plug-in hybrid electrical vehicles. This is at the end of 2021. The target for 2023 is to arrive at 32 BEV models. That it means it will be 1/3 of the whole Stellantis portfolio. So a huge shift with respect to what was happening 2 years ago. To do that, Stellantis has created a new business unit. That is the business unit for which we are working for. That is the mobility business unit. Our target is to research competitive and affordable solution to lead customers to choose electrified mobility. We know that the electrification has some constraints. What we are trying to do is to create value for our customer and for the company, in particular working on 3 different pillars. So the first one is cooperation. We think that electrification is a challenge that we need to face together. So not only Stellantis is an automaker, but with the institution, with other companies that are coming from other sectors. for example, the energy sector, the retail sector. We will see later on that we have a lot of partnership, and we think that the partnership will lead us to meet this important target that we saw before. Then innovation, we are working on innovative program to face the challenge of the mobility. For example, think about the wireless charging. Think about all the innovative charging solution that can be sold and offered to our customer to reduce the so-called range anxiety and the challenge regarding the charging time. We have a target of 32 km per minute of charging speed in the next years, thanks to our new platform and charging system. And the third one, the third pillar, is information. As a mobility business unit, we are working a lot with university and students, so thanks for this opportunity, but I think that in the last 2 years we have involved more than 15,000 students, trying to do, I would say, an activity that is intended to give to the students all the, I would say, basic information to understand that electromobility is the future and how we need to face this challenge, but at the same time also to receive from the students some, I would say, breakthrough and interesting ideas that can be important for us to understand what the new generation are expecting from the mobility. And we will see later on that we have some examples of programs that have been created, delivered, thanks to the ideas coming from the students. Now, I would like to show you some facts and figures of the last year to show that, I mean, mobility is really taking place in these days. So first of all, as we saw before, that Stellantis is already 34 LED nameplates on the streets in Europe. We are the first worldwide OEM for the sales of low-emission vehicle LCV, so light commercial vehicle sales in 2021. We deliver more than 16,000 vehicles. We've been the first for LED sales in Spain, France, and Italy, and in particular, some products, in particular the new 500 Electric and the Peugeot E208, are studying the best-selling BEVs in Europe 30 in the top 10 position. Then some other figures. Our LED sales increased of 160% in 2021 versus 2020. So I mean something that is really happening in this year. And the mix registration. So considering the world registration of passenger car in Europe, now our mix of LED, so battery electrical vehicle and plug-in hybrid, is at 18% in December 2021. That is doubled with respect to January 2021. And we are trying to do the same also in the other regions because we are a global company. And I think that it is important to mention the Jeep Wrangler 4xe, you know, the off-road vehicle offered by Jeep. And it is the best-selling PHEV in the US retail. So also United States are facing electrification. And I think that it is important to mention what President Biden announced, so the target of minus 52% CO2 reduction in 2030 with respect to the 2005 values. So the same of what is happening in Europe. Of course, we had to face some headwinds, the pandemic, the raw material price increase, and the shortage of microchip. In particular, the pandemic happened in the precise period in which we were in the process to launch, it was FCA at the point in time, the new Fiat 500 Electric and the Jeep 4xe. So this is one of the ideas coming from the students. So we did an hackathon near Turingotto before the pandemic. It was November 2019. And we asked the students, have you ever drove an electrical vehicle? 95% of them said to us, no. So we thought that at the point in time, once the pandemic started, a good idea could be to create an application to be used on the smartphone, and you see here the logo, one for Jeep, one for Fiat, and one for Fiat Professional, and now the target is to extend also to the PSA brands, an app that is simulating the usage of an LED cars. So simply activating your app on your smartphone and driving your current internal combustion engine vehicle, you can simulate the usage of a battery electrical vehicle or plug-in hybrid, understanding all the advantages in terms of cost, CO2 impact, and so on. We have created a sort of guide to answer to the main question of the potential customer. So the idea was to use a pretty simple asset to answer to all the doubts that can come out from the potential customer that we have. And before leaving the stage to Vittorio, I want to show you these slides this is referred to the partnership side. So as I was saying before, the importance of work with the best-in-class partners. You see here at the bottom of the slide that we have ICC, LG, and Samsung. We are working with them to produce our batteries in the future. So we have announced that we are going to build 3 gigafactories in Europe. 2 of them are already I would say, not in early stage of the development. With Node, that is an energy provider, we have a strong partnership with them that is called Free to Movie Solution to offer charging services to our customer. But in parallel, we have also other partnerships, for example, with Vittorio to work on solid-state batteries that we announced that will be available in our lineup from 2026. NIDEC to produce electric motors, but that's not all. For example, we have a partnership with Carrefour to offer additional services to our customer going to go shopping at Carrefour and so on. So the message is it's important to face the electromobility challenge with the best-in-class partners that we can find also in other industry sectors. So now I leave the stage to Vittorio.
Good morning also on my side. We will now through some more technical elements, let me say in this way. As Gabriele was telling you, one of the main Stellantis goals is to try to add the technology, but add technology meeting the customer expectations. So it's a very important point is to deeply understand what customer really want, more than the emotional engagement with the environment, and try to find solution fitting the needs. That means try to tackle this point, the affordability, the sustainability, the cost side. We said that the vehicles are not less expensive than the conventional, and in some cases are perceived as giving you less than the previous, and so as to add an element around to solve the point. Adding to that, the fact that having 14 brands, as Gabriele was saying, try to find a way to address this technology in the different brands. The good point of the electrical technology is that can be exploited for very different purposes, from the classical CO2 emission, noxious emission, to the performance, to the silence, to the acceleration, to the comfort, and so you can also better move the technology depending on the typology of vehicle. Clearly, sell Maserati is different to sell Fiat Panda to a very different customer. And obviously the innovation area, and that's another important point. When you want to make a transition so strong as it is, at the end, at least in Europe, to cope also the Commission target, we have to completely modify our solution in a few years, because for OEMs, 10 years is not a so long time. In general, design put in production a vehicle and the life of the vehicle is a 10 years travel. So it's just one generation at the end, from the idea to the end of life of the vehicle platform. Ask to move something that was before considered research, nice to have, something to have in the future, shorter and shorter in the time. Before, when I was mentioning the solid-state battery, if you go to read simply announcement, 3 years ago was the technology after post-2030. Now the main part of car makers are claiming we will have in production in 5 years from now. What means this push? That you have to be able to sell a product, new product, with no experience, not the 130 years of experience of the engine, that will be able to satisfy the customer and be reliable for 10 years. Not having the time to make a full trial of experience on the technology. And that's very, very tough, because customer is happy to hear that there are new technology, new improvement, but on the other hand, obviously expect the same reliability, the same safety level of the traditional components. And this is obviously asking for big effort. At the end, the company tried to, as first, produce vehicle with a less cost base level, trying to classify and to merge the different brands with a limited number of platforms. We have at the end 4 platforms. STLA stands for Stella, Stellantis is the reason why. We call small, medium, large frame with different range target mentioned in the slide. The first is at the end the one covering A, B, C segment car, so the traditional European cheaper car. The premium vehicles are covered by the Stella Medium. As an example of Stella Medium, you see a DS car, Alfa is another example. Then we have Stella Large. Here there are aspects dealing with all-wheel drive, performances, so-called American muscle, so brands more devoted to the high performance, to the emotional side. in this case is to be blended with an environmental concern that today is not respected by this typical car, obviously. And finally, last but not least, for our business is the last, the frame. It is the one dealing with the Jeep family, that in the US is the vehicle. Don't forget that our typical North American customer is not the one living in Los Angeles or in New York, but is the one living in the area among the two big mountains of the US, so the central area, where typically to go to buy milk, you need to move 20 kilometers from your house with the car. It's not it's the same scenario we have in Italy or in London or in France. So we are very close to the problem of environment. For us, congested traffic emission is something we experience each day. For them, what they experience sometimes is the bear in front of them in the car, and there is not the policeman close to them to save them. So the need of vehicle is totally different. And according to that, the platform has to cover the different things. Obviously, the platform has to cover, being platform dealing with very different region and country, high volume, so designed to be able to sustain a growth up of volume for each platform very high. The Stellantis company at the end is aiming to sell cars obviously in Europe, obviously in North America, but also in South America. We had experience with Latin in the past. Obviously Asia, India, in particular China, are the more challenging field of to try to sell cars, so the volume comes from that. And this is the big push, the big need of push from the battery side. If you want to have so many electric vehicles, first you need to have the batteries. It seems obvious, but it's not so obvious simply a nice vehicle to have the battery too. And the strategy is a strategy, you see the number for the short and the mid-term, 2025, 2030, that is based on a mix of internal production capability. All the car makers that a few years ago were looking at the battery as something to be bought, a box to be put in the car, now are becoming, with partnership with company with proper chemical expertise, company able to do batteries, cells I mean, in direct inside. And in the short term we are going to have putting in place 3 gigafactories that are called. At the beginning there will be 3, one in North America, 2 in Europe, the 2 in Europe are France and Germany. And in 2035, adding another one in Italy, probably for Europe, that is a discussion these days between company and our Ministry of Economy about that, the sustainable and development economy, that is the Termoli plant, former plant for traditional vehicle. And it is based on a joint venture, ACC is a joint venture, between initially PSA, Opel, now also the Fiat side, so Stellantis, but also Mercedes, and a leader, at the end, European leader of battery, that is SAF Total, it is a French company, but also with other partnerships. The partnership can be defined with some specific players, for instance, 2 gigafactory will be done, one US with Samsung and one with LG, so Korean partners, but also Chinese, as CATL and others, because to satisfy the volumes, it's not enough to do them only at home by yourself. And here you see the very impressive number of gigawatt hour produced. To give you a reference, today, a small car, if you are not familiar, has on board 40-50 kilowatt hour. A luxury car can be the double. So imagine the scale up to the giga value number figures. Which with technology, at the end, 2 main technologies, not to go too much in deep, but to give you a more clear understanding of the simple high-level slide, there are 2 big technologies. One is the technology giving us the highest performance in terms of energy density, specific energy, and so on, that is based on the classical lithium-ion, nickel, cobalt, manganese, try to reduce as much as possible the cobalt content. The aim is to avoid to have cobalt inside, because cobalt is, at the end, you know, a critical material. There are a lot of concern about that. Speak about the environmental with cobalt taken from the mine in Congo is not the best way to cover at 360 degrees the problem. And the other is a less performing technology based on iron phosphate, lithium iron phosphate technology, metal phosphate, that can fit sector where we need vehicle with less performance. At the end, if as it is, small vehicles are mainly used in town, for town usage, except out of the problem of the motion of the customer, we really don't need to have so much range, because typical usage in town is not 800 km by day. In this case, there are technologies cheaper that can fit the purpose. And obviously, the big problem is the cost. And when we speak about cost of battery, it's a more complex problem than the battery of our mobile phone. Because don't forget that in a typical battery pack, battery system we call it, today there is at least 1/3 of the weight coming from other than the cells, housing, cooling, heating, breakers, BMS, all the systems that make the life of the battery long and the safety of the vehicle proper. And typically this part is also to be reduced, to be better designed, to be more developed at engineering level, trusting on vehicle design with the purpose. We come from a first generation lithium-ion vehicle in which the vehicle was designed for thermal combustion engine purpose and the battery were added where the room asked for. Now we are moving in a world in which we are putting a big battery and designing the car around. Completely change of paradigm also in the design of the vehicle as a whole. Very important in this pathway is the question how to address lithium availability, lithium recycling, all the problem around lithium, in general, the technology about that. And there are different steps in this way, in this direction. One is to be able to repair the batteries. In a battery pack, we have today 200 in general cells connected. It's enough to have fault on one of them to have all the pack out of service, so obviously that's an important step. Second level is the so-called remanufacturing, so starting from the module inside, to imagine to use the battery, this module after the first life in other vehicle. Why we speak about after the first life? Because due to the range limits and limitation of the technology, we consider to be replaced a battery that has lost only 20% of the initial capacity. So if we go from the first life to the recycling, we are putting in the basket 80% of the energy of the battery. And that obviously is totally out of the logic to make the system wise and sustainable. This battery that has 80% of the energy available maybe is not fitting the scope of the automotive business, but maybe can fit first level other type of vehicle with less performance requirement, or more longer, be applied in totally different segments. There are a lot of projects trying to understand which are the segments where this battery can be effectively applied. As for instance, all the systems supporting the grid, all the systems with big batteries to back up can be one of them. Question coming any time, but there is really this business, is really something fitting, is really working, we will see, frankly speaking. When there are announcements, the last one by General Motors, that says, I am developing a battery that can give you 1 million kilometers, probably, if there will be, we will have a battery like the one in the mobile, one life, full stop. If, as it is today, and this dream is just an announcement, but not reached, there is large room to do that. So companies to be open and flexible to the very different scenario that will be created by the different number we will see in practice, let me say. A very important point is the charging. Why? Because charging is the link between the usability of the vehicle and the penetration of the technology. We've understood that the charged battery is not easy like to make refueling. Despite the dream of the customer, charging a vehicle is not putting inside electrons, like to put inside the fuel. Electrons come in and come out because it's an electrical circuit. Battery thrust on chemical reaction, reduction, oxidation reaction. And these are time, efficiency, meaning not 100% of what I put in is available, and deep, quick aging. And that clearly is a problem. The dream to be fast as a traditional car is not easy to be reached. Maybe you never think about, but when you do refueling, in your hands are passing 10 megawatts. 10 megawatts. If we imagine a world in which we have millions of cars, each of them anytime going to the station, even if it were possible by technology, is taking 10 megawatts, you can understand the stability of the grid, stability is out of discussion. No sense. This is not the way to. The way is another. For instance, taking care the fact that it's more difficult to charge, but I can charge in plenty of places in principle. I can charge if I live in a garage, I can charge if I work in office in the spot, I can do during the market phase, during the shop phase in the park or the mall, I can do at the movie when I go to see a movie at the cinema, I can do it different ways. Someone is exploring also the idea to invent, before mentioned, the charge while driving, meaning the vehicle is charged, in this case by inductive system by the road, while it's in motion. And if at this point I charge the vehicle in motion, I do not need so much power because the time of charging becomes all the travel itself. So it's a complete change of paradigm, potentially. Who will be the winner? Difficult to say, frankly speaking. Another important point is staying on the more conventional technology. If you want really to move electric vehicle out of the town, we need a charger on the highway. And here the game is do the right choices. A few years ago, Enel submitted a document to our ministry defining which were the needs. And I remember the document was saying 50 kilowatts is the right power as maximum for fast charging. Today, as you heard, we speak about 150 available, 350 is a need, and someone in Germany started to speak 1 megawatt. 50 kilowatts was the reference. Except the difficulty to find the right crystal ball to find the right number. The real point is another one, it is the following. If you do investment to create an infrastructure, it means put money, all of us, trusting that in years the infrastructure will be effective. If we make a mistake of estimation, 50 or 350, we waste our money. And we have not the right solution. So these choices are very tough, very difficult. The two worlds have to run in parallel. An example from hydrogen. Daimler, years ago, pushed a lot in Germany fuel cell. They built up a large infrastructure for refueling, hydrogen refueling. Then there was not the vehicle. And without the vehicle, the infrastructure was not used. And the station were there to take dust over, not to be used for the park. So running pairs is difficult. And each technology we are looking, if it is compressed natural gas, if it is hydrogen, if it is really what we want, ask for new infrastructure. And what we have today from diesel and gasoline grows up in the time in 100 years. So now we want in 6 years to change everything. So it's very, very challenging again. And now a video on an interesting project we are doing with the partnership with the Free2Movie solution that goes under the name of vehicle to grid. So the idea to try to understand if it is possible to use electric vehicle to interact bidirectionally with the grid, electrical grid. The starting element is the following. Have you in mind which is the typical time of usage of a small car in its life? Considering 100% the life, how much of this 100% is spent in motion?
10%?
Not more. Someone also less. So we have an asset, very costly, very expensive, always parked. If we were able, in this time, to do something better than simply leave the car there, if it is in my garage, okay, if it is outside, also open and nobody damage it, because there is also this element, probably the story could be very interesting. Obviously, the logic which is, battery is a bidirectional device, give energy in motion, take back energy braking, can do the same with the grid. Instead to be only charged when depleted, can also contribute to transfer some energy back to the grid. It's technically possible. Points are, each discharge cycle versus the grid is leaving you the equivalent number of kilometers of life for the motion. Because aging of the battery is not depending on where the electrons goes. It's due to the fact that electrons are coming out. Second element, try to understand where and how to do it. For instance, in this project, it is a demo project that anyway has the aim to become not only a demo project, but something fitting with the stabilization of the mid-voltage grid of Terna, that is the transmission system operator in Italy, is the following. I put the place out of the production line in Air I put here this number of vehicles, 560 was in the previous slide probably, after they are produced, so new car, and I live there for a few days. Meaning that the vehicles are all the same, are all high performance, so the performance versus the grid is the best one you can have. All the vehicles are new, are well performing. The aging is negligible because they stay only there 3 days. But this function can create for the system stabilization of the grid. It is an important effect for all of us. We are European, we are not used like in America to be out of electricity each 3 months, 3 days. We are used to have one blackout in the life. I remember when in Italy there was the blackout 10 years ago. In US it happens 1 week each week. But it's a different scenario of geography. Yeah. And the second is to create profitability for the company, because the company offering this service to the transmission system operator take money back. So instead to have car located in the big park in front for no purpose, it can become an asset. You can imagine in future this distributed. It's not a place where there are this vehicle, but it's my car at my home that does it. But I need to make my customer able to understand where to put the energy. Imagine a year in which you are blocked for pandemic. The number of kilometers planned to be that year is lost. You don't use the car. Today is a waste of money. In this way can be a way to transfer money in the grid, giving a service to the grid and taking advantage. You can imagine how complex is the story. Very easy to describe, very easy to show the potential. Another story is to do in practice. And so ask for big effort, research, investment. Imagine only simply the cybersecurity level of the system. When you start to put energy and money on the grid, is very dangerous. Another example, still in this direction, is the so-called vehicle to home. There are already in the world people that has a place where a roof with a solar panel, that has a car parked in the garage, and maybe also battery backup at home, that take advantage of that to collect the energy from the sun in the day and use in the night, for instance, for the house's purpose. You can do also not having a battery devoted out of the car, but the battery itself of the vehicle. This is another interesting element to be investigated. Again, guys, this is applied research with a big push. It's not something already available that works. But the projects are, again, office present, giving clear technical advantages, and now the business cases to be running in parallel. Okay. Let me leave the floor again.
Grazie, Vittorio. So, you saw some of example of the activity that we are doing, trying to innovate our offers. So, we're trying to go beyond the obvious. The target is that we are enlarging our scope of activity. So, in the past we were investing only on automotive product. Now we are investing also in infrastructure. For sure, we are seeking for the help of the institution, but we have created, in this case, the joint venture that Vittorio was referring to, that is called Free2Movie Solution. And inside the project of Free2Movie Solution, there is a new one that is called Atlante. The target of the Atlante project is to install in 2030 at least 35,000 charging stations that will be fast charged, so with minimum power of 150 kilowatt. And the target is to combine the technology, so fast charge with vehicle to grid. So if the vehicle to grid in the future will be available also for the final customer, the idea is to have them, to give them the possibility to charge their car and to plug the car in this charging station, with the possibility to get money from this ancillary service in order to reduce the total cost of ownership of the car. These numbers are very important, and we focus only on 4 countries, so Italy, Spain, France and Portugal. We know very well that the situation of the charging station is not the same in all the countries in Europe. So the top country for the charging station as of today is Netherlands, with more than 60,000 charging stations. And we know that the country is pretty small. In Italy, we have around 15,000 charging stations, so less than 30,000 charging points, because I think that each charging station, at least a quick one, have 2 charging points. And in Italy, right now, we have around 250,000 vehicles that can be plugged to the grid. So the ratio is 10 cars per charging station. In 2030 in Italy, the studies are saying that there will be 6 million of electrical vehicles, but the studies are not saying that will be 600,000 charging stations. So this is an important point. That's why, speaking about, again, partnership is important to do the same job together. So also that institution will push on the creation of a charging station everywhere in Europe, but also in the other countries. In parallel, as I was mentioning before, that's why we are working on innovative projects that can change the paradigm of how to charge the car. So we have announced in December a project with Brevemi. Brevemi is the highway connecting Bergamo, Brescia and Milano, in parallel to the A4. It is a private highway, and with a lot of different partners, we have announced this project that is testing the so-called dynamic wireless power transfer. So there is already a ring of 1 kilometer powered by 1 megawatt of electrical power, where we are testing with IVECO our vehicles in order to test the effectiveness of this dynamic wireless charging. So the idea is to charge the car while it's moving. So at the same time, we can face two problems. So the size of the battery, for sure, if you can charge the car while driving, you don't need a big battery, so we can reduce the cost of the car. And in parallel, we can solve the charging time issue. So if you are charging the car while it's moving, you don't have the issue of the charging time. So as you see, it's an innovative project, but as we were saying before, again, the infrastructure needs to come together with the car, because we have to drive on highways that are equipped with specific coils that are placed 80 centimeters below the asphalt to charge your car while it's moving. We have announced other programs that are innovation programs. In particular, this one is called Geofencing. It was done with the Comune di Torino and 5T, so the company that is managing the low emission zone access zone. The idea is to use the plug-in hybrid in full electric mode when it's entering in the city center. That is something, I mean, pretty simple. The point is that now the company that is managing the access to the low emission zone cannot recognize if the vehicle is effectively running in zero emission mode. So the idea is to send data to the Comune di Torino, to 5T company, to let them know that the car is really driving in 100% electric mode. In this way, the customer can avoid to receive any kind of fines. So the idea is to use the plug-in hybrid as a completely battery electrical vehicle, at least in the city center. The car can recognize, based on your trip, the amount of kilometers needed, and can save the energy of the battery in order to be compliant with these targets while driving in the city center. But as I was saying before, we are trying to do that with the students, with the new generation. We think that it's very important that education goes in parallel with the evolution of the mobility, in particular because we need new professional skills. So think about the announcement of our CEO in the last days. We are hiring a lot of engineers working on the software side. While in the past we were more focused mainly on mechanical engineering figures, now the evolution is regarding the software world, digitalization, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. So the market is evolving, but also the skill that we are looking for are evolving. And as I was saying before, it's important for us to give the message of the mobility to the new generation, to create awareness, but also to receive from them some inputs regarding how they see the future of mobility. One interesting question that we ask to the students every time is that, I mean, are you looking for buying a vehicle in the future? And the answer now is no. We just need to use the car. So the disownership, disownership, is one trend that is taking place everywhere. So that's why now we're investing on the car sharing. For example, I think that in Torino, probably you tested it, there is the Leases Go car sharing. It's available also in Milan and in Rome, and is running with incredible results. So we are offering the new 500 electric, 100% electric, with a very little price to everyone who can drive the car in Turin without releasing any CO2, but without the need to purchase a car. And in parallel, there is another trend that we see that is very important, the sense of community. So people that are buying electrical vehicles wants to be part of a community that is rewarding the fact that you are helping the planet, you are working to reduce CO2 impact. And so this is another idea that we tried to develop after we spoke with the new generation. And that's why we partner with Kiri. Kiri is a startup coming from UK. Kiri is the name in Japanese of the, I would say, best performance trees in the world, that is the Paulownia, is the tree that is awarded to release the highest quantity of oxygen in the atmosphere and to absorb the highest quantity of CO2. So Kiri has developed the first digital green coin. So the idea is to use this coin to reward every kind of sustainable behavior. So the idea, in particular with the Fiat brand, was to include the Kiri experience inside the Fiat app that the customer used to manage from remote the car. So the more you drive in electric mode, because it means electrical vehicle, and the more you do it with the best eco score, that is an index that is measuring how sustainably you are driving, if you are saving the energy of the battery, or on the contrary, if you are driving in the worst way, so doing acceleration and deceleration in, I would say, a tougher way. The higher is the eco score, the higher is the number of Kiri coins that are generated. you earn Kiricoin in your wallet inside the app, and you can spend this Kiricoin on a dedicated marketplace where there are more than 350 brands. This was an idea coming from the new generation. The idea is to be part of a community that is rewarded thanks to the fact that are trying to preserve the environment. And I want to close with this claim that is very important for us. So this is what we are trying to do. We are working together in all the region with all the departments to try to lead the way the world moves, delivering services that are comfortable, appealing, and in particular affordable, and sustainable for the planet and its citizens. So we see that the importance of preserving the environment while offering products that are fitting the needs of the customer is key for us. So thanks for the attention and for your time.
Thank you very much again. Also, my point of view, very satisfied for your interventions. Yes, there is already a question there. Please.
No, please finish. I'll go ahead. Car sharing. What's the future? How do you guys see that for 2030? How many cars are this ownership trend? This could be a problem for big car companies? Or like, is it a problem? Is it an opportunity?
Okay, no, good question. In theory, it's a problem. We try to see it as an opportunity, so to create a service that is based on the car sharing, and we think that the trend is growing. So that's why, as of today, we have started in Italy with 3 cities. We are trying to expand also in other countries. So consider that now we have around 1,000 vehicles moving around in Italy with the car sharing, and we see that people are loving this offer because it's smart, it's digital, it's fully integrated in your smartphone, and is 100% electric, so CO2 net, at least from tank to wheel. So for us, the evolution of the car sharing is important, and we think that it will be an asset for us. So that's why now we are saying that we want to offer mobility solution, not just cars. And in particular, it will be important, at least in Europe. As Vittorio was saying before, probably the market of the car sharing will not be the same in the United States, for example, but it could be the same in the main cities of the United States. So think about Boston, New York, and so on. But in Europe, it will be growing, and we think that we want to invest in that kind of topic with our companies, leases, and free to move.
Thank you for this presentation. From a climate change student perspective, I'm asking if the car companies are controlling the mining of raw materials, whether they are respecting the health, safety, security, environment policies. Second point that I'm wondering about, what makes the customers get rid of their diesel cars to buy electrical cars. Third point, I'm asking about if those car manufacturers are willing to cooperate with transmission operator companies such as Sterna to increase the the energy flexibility for a better energy transition. Fourth point, sorry, what are the job opportunities for climate change students that you can offer in the future? Thank you.
Okay, I will try to answer to the first two, then maybe Vittorio will do the third. Let's see for the fourth because it's the toughest one. Okay, so let's start from the second. So you see why a customer, if I correctly got the point, can choose an electrical vehicle instead of the diesel one. We think that the answer is that they can choose an electrical vehicle if the electrical vehicle will fit the range needs, and that's why we're working on 4 platforms offering up to 800 kilometers. That is a range completely comparable to diesel engines and gasoline engine, and if the cost is aligned to the other kind of vehicles. So that's why we are working on that, and as of today working on other purchasing solutions. For example, we have some solution where you can or finance the car, of course, but also you can, I would say, pay a subscription and you can change the car whenever you want, paying a monthly installment that is equal to the one that you pay for an internal combustion engine vehicle. Then, of course, if the price of the battery will decrease, and this is the target for us, starting from 2026, it will be similar, the cost of the battery electrical vehicle to the IC ones. And in parallel, I want to say that it's very, very important that the institution work on the so-called eco-incentive. If it's something, starting from March, they should be again available in Italy, and we see that the market is perfectly following the availability of the eco-incentive. And in fact, we saw a decrease in the PV market in January and February because the eco-incentive were not available, so this is something important. The first question regarding raw material, for sure we are working with our supply chain and purchasing department to select suppliers that are providing material, taking care of how the mining is performed, how people are working on that. So this is why now we are changing our, supply chain approach in order to guarantee this point. And also in parallel, that's why we are working also on the nickel cobalt free solution for the battery chemistry, as Vittorio showed before.
Keep in mind that all the companies, car maker, but not only car maker, has to prepare each year a report, sustainability report, that is evaluated by proper body. And from the evaluation of that, the value of the company can go up or go down. So we can be in favor or not of the environment, but we have to first start. And some OEMs, for instance, BMW is one of the leader, has now certified all the chain of the raw material for the critical one, cobalt in battery. For instance, also material for permanent magnet, aluminum, for instance, on that. And that obviously is becoming a must. Meaning that even if we are at the end of the chain, we do the car, we have to some way take care of all the steps before. As the question coming before. At the end, we pay fines on the 10th wheel, but we are becoming more and more responsible over the complete chain. The third was the one about the relation between OEMs and energy provider.
Yeah, to increase the energy and flexibility.
Yeah, keep in mind, up to some years ago, we were two business. Cars were the business, electricity for the grid as its business. The only linking point is, technically looking at experience, the charging phase. The phase in which energy is transferred today in one way, tomorrow maybe in the two ways mentioned. And in this way, we are facing what is behind the plug and the socket. We were used to say there is the energy provider. Now we realize that behind the socket there is a word. There is the distributor, the company making the transmission, the company making the production, the aggregator, the one that sells the service and so on. So it's a very complex ecosystem of players, and clearly each of us has interdependency from the other to reach the goal. So looking at the noble purposes, each of us has the same goal. At the same time, each of the companies try to make its profit. So it's a complex relation, sometimes with good effect, sometimes not so much. At the beginning, there was a real fight, looking simply the standardization model. We have ISO and they have IEC. ISO stands for International Standardization Organization, IEC for International Electrotechnical Committee. And the two one were trying to put regulation on the same experience that is the charging. But the simple charging is the mix of a car, a cable, and the grid. And at the end, the experience is the full system, safe, reliable, secure, and so on. Why each of us was looking the concern and the constraint by its perspective. Now we are learning more each other. There are more and more also leagues that put the company together. They are building up new companies that are starting to deal in the field of the other. It has to be done. Timing of the business, the merging and the marriage to be understood.
Fourth question. So we have
Possible contagion.
No, for sure. So we have a dedicated department, the human resources and recruitment department, that is managing all the potential internship and so on. For sure, this is something that we are offering everywhere in the world. As I was saying before, now we are more focusing on the software side, so expert of IoT, AI, and in general software engineer. But yeah, it's something that is present and is managed by a dedicated department.
Said another way, if you look at the full number, the business, the number is people doing the component, or the service run. So software is an example and so on. But due to the point we were mentioning in this discussion, we need a limited but well-selected number of experts of the system at a higher level. Otherwise, if you have too many experts of the single screw, but you are not a coordinated full picture, the system does not work.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have to close. Well, as a matter of fact, I have to. Sorry, please.
Thank you. I really appreciated the fact that there is a great passion by the client side, for this kind of transition. From the car point of view, you are the clients for the components suppliers. So my question is, how do you think that you as a car brand, you can push your suppliers to make some improvements, because it's not easy. You have now higher costs, so you now have a big challenge from my point of view, because you need
that's true enough.
yeah. So you, from a certain way, you need to push for components that cost less, but at the same time, you need to push for an efficiency point of view,
We want more and pay less.
Yes, yes, correct. So it's not easy.
That's clear, but if you see, at the end depends on, there are some critical elements. Battery for a battery electric vehicle is the evidence. A typical car like 500 electric has on board more than 300 kilograms of batteries, 300. You heard before the number of the trucks, very impressive, tons of batteries. So it's not something that you can put in the pocket and be there.
With a lot of lithium.
But lithium not so much, be aware. Because the point is, that's an interesting point.
Yes, that's right.
Take a cell of 1 kilogram, lithium iron phosphate. Do you know much in terms of weight percentage is lithium inside?
5%.
So it's not negligible. But who made the calculation considering the full weight of the battery system as 1-to-1 lithium is making a mistake of 3 orders of magnitude. Only that. But anyway, needing millions of cars, we will reach anyway the volume. If we can move the number of us area. In this area, the typical approach, as we've seen, is to become more and more engaged in doing the component itself. Today, near all the car makers have a joint venture to produce cells. So we are moving closer and closer to the raw material, becoming some way the maker of the components for ourselves. And it is for the components more strategic and critical. On the other, of which there is the equation you were announcing, we can see two effects. One is that the suppliers are very proactive. All the suppliers in the automotive business and not, look in the scenario, are moving faster than us. Our mailing lists are full of people proposing us new solutions, new ideas, new ways, trying to use something that is by another field as cross technology now. So the technology push is not so much needed. Sometimes you have to break the push because some ideas are too much extreme in respect of their reliability. About the cost, it's true, clearly the cost could be higher. The way are, on one side, to try to make synergies, putting in common as much as possible components, few platforms with high volumes, and the second is to look carefully and deeply what your customer really wants and is open to pay. At the end, in a car, generalist, I feel, personal opinion, that more than one half of the cost is addressing something that the customer do not recognize. Because he's a generalist. So he's the lunch, the wedding lunch for the people eating meat and the people eating just vegetables. Obviously, there is not the right menu for everybody. It's a compromise. The more we will go in the direction of customize the vehicle for the purpose, the more I feel will be easier to understand what is really the need of the customer, putting the money where the added value you want to pay is supported. For other elements that we spend a lot of money to have on board, maybe not. Don't forget, in a Ferrari car, the alternator is done by the cheaper Panda one. Because customer of a Ferrari is not looking at the alternator. Why? Is very interested in the engine power and the painting of the car, other elements. You have to clearly understand what the customer wants and spend the money there. Not because you are a bad man, because you do the service for what he wants to have.
Yes.
So this is not easy.
Okay. I think we have to conclude. I just had a couple of issues. In the transport domain, one felt issue is queuing. The queuing theory applied to the practical cases. So we have heard about the conventional wired charging or wireless in case like Starline in Turin, or decharge while driving. If I think at the first case, and we know the time required for charging, well, and if I apply the Q in theory, I understand that the number of static charging spots have to be quite higher than the foreseen ones, unless everybody has a personal charging spot. But this is not so compliant with the Italian situation, where, as far as I know, 60% of citizens live in buildings, and I don't know which percentage of these buildings has the possibility to charge.
There's a picture of people moving the cable from the balcony to the room.
I've seen that. And the second one is the higher is the power, the higher is typically the cost for charging. So for a slow charging, I may pay at home 18, 20, 22 cents of euros.
For 3 months ago, now it's recalculated.
Yes, okay, but anyway, the order is more or less that. While moving towards fast and rapid charging, these prices arrive to 30, 40, 50, up to 79.
More.
And even more.
There is a simple way. Area fixed 80 cents as limit, but was for charger up to 50 kilowatts. If you upgrade the charger to 350, you're allowed to do what you like.
Okay. So this means I've tried to make with a thesis, a Master of Science thesis, a break-even, and it's around 36, 38, 40.
We are not expert as you, but the numbers did it.
Okay, so this means that we have to think a bit about the percentage of static and slow charging and the percentage of fast, rapid, and with high power charging.
And Professor, I think that we are working a lot, for example, on the condominium side. That in Italy is really an issue. In France, there is a project in which the government pays the installer to provide the energy, the energy supply in the condominiums with specific eco incentive also for that kind of topic. In Italy, something that as of today there is not. Okay. And it's weird.
We have a lot of regulation, fire brigades and others, they get more complex. In Italy, we have to open discussion.
You need to pass to the assembly of condominium, so if no one wants to install the charging station, doesn't want that the condominium space for that, so it's an issue.
And France has also published a document where it addresses 90-95% of slow charging with respect to...
Yeah, but because at the end, if you are looking at the story from the gray side, the problem is that you have a spectrum of power required in the 24 hour that is not balanced as they like. There is a big peak in the daytime and a big wall, big canyon in the night. And the higher efficient production system station, unit, plant, are not so easily following the dynamic. They are able to give an average value with a limited regulation level. So what they dream, and it is very logical, is to have a lot of people at home in the night charging each of us 2 kilowatts. That is also energetically speaking the solution. But to do that, as Professor Chiara was saying, you need to have a garage, you need to have a slot to charge, you need a solution, you need to have someone doing maybe nuclear energy massively like in France. Is a system problem. That's the reason why we need also engineers with a wider point of view, otherwise we address only the bit.
System engineering viewpoint.
There is another technology we are exploring. And someone is already in production in China, not just swapping. It's an never-ending story. Each 10 years we come back to the idea to swap the battery mechanically.
Yeah, you're right.
For us, now it's mining. If you go in China, there is a company called NIO that is doing it full scale. But in China, the company is doing the cells and the battery, doing the cars, doing the starting station, with good agreement with the government.
Yes. Okay, I think we have to close.
Yes.
Thank you very much again. Very
you.
interesting from my point of view, and thank you for listening. Okay.
Cristina, once again, thank you.